all, and thank you for joining us for the webinar on charting what's next for your learning and talent strategies in partnership with Skillsoft. This is Neha from People Matters, and before moving to the agenda of the day, let me give you a brief of the topic. Research shows that organizations with strong learning and talent management processes drive business results, more revenue, greater employee engagement, reduced staff turnover, high customer retention, and the list goes on. This makes maturity your learning and talent strategies a business imperative. But before you can determine how best to improve, you need to understand your organization's current state. Skillsoft's 5-stage benchmarking framework can help you assess your current stage of maturity and develop a plan to advance to the next level. In this webinar, we will cover the following points. The maturity indicators we have designed based on observations of thousands of organizations across all sizes, geographies, and industries. How to diagnose your organization's present level of maturity. What are the steps to improve learning and talent effectiveness and ultimately business results? Let me now introduce the speaker for this webinar. We have the privilege of having with us Kieran King, Vice President, Global Customer Insights, Skillsoft. Kieran King began her career in the talent field 20 years ago. In 1999, Kieran joined CBT Systems, and she has consulted with companies to design enterprise learning programs, implement learning and talent platforms, conduct learning strategies and benchmarking engagements, and advise on measuring learning impacts on business outcomes. Kieran has authored several methodologies and white papers. She blogs regularly. She's been published by industry magazines, and she is a well-respected conference speaker. Today, Kieran serves as Vice President of Global Customer Insight for Skillsoft, where she studies the composition of successful learning programs and partnerships throughout the world. Our partner for today's webinar is Skillsoft. Skillsoft is the global leader in e-learning. They train more professionals than any other company in the world. They are trusted by world's leading organizations, including 65% of the Fortune 500. At Skillsoft, they believe that knowledge is the fuel for innovation, and innovation is the fuel for business growth. They have 1 lakh plus courses, videos, and books are accessed over 130 million times every month in 160 countries and 29 languages with 100% cloud access anytime, anywhere. Their key product areas are in business skills, IT skills, digital skills, and compliances. Since they began in 1998, they have trained over 400 million users and 1 million learning materials. We have an exciting topic to discuss in this webinar today. So without any further delay, let me invite Kieran to take over. Over to you, Kieran.
Thank you so very much for that tremendous introduction. I am incredibly excited to be joining you today. I'm joining you from Atlanta, Georgia, in the southeastern part of the United States, and I'm sharing with you today a message that we have been propagating in every single continent of the globe. It's a very exciting message, I think, because it really equips learning and development organizations to take a really concrete step to advancing their talent and learning strategy. So with that, let me go ahead and share with you what our agenda looks like for the session today. The first thing we will be doing is setting the context. What do I mean by that? Well, let's reflect on all the different things that are going on in the landscapes in which we operate, because, of course, HR is operating in an incredibly exciting period of time in our entire profession. I have never been more enthusiastic about the opportunities ahead of us. The other thing we will do is literally unpack the framework. So we spoke in the introduction about a 5-stage framework. The 5-stage framework also has 9 essential indicators, and we will go into each one of those in detail. Then I will transition the discussion to speak about the 2 enabling tools that we have provided to you and that you will be receiving links to download directly after the session. We will also be calling all of you into action with 4 key steps on how you can chart a path to take your organization to a greater level of maturity. So before we close today, as Nihal shared with you, we have some suggested next steps and also a question and answer period. So that is our context and the agenda, the landscape for the conversation today. Let's go ahead and talk about the landscape that we're all operating in. Well, it has been my experience, and many of you, I'm sure, are observing this as well, is that HR is undergoing a transformation, a reinvention, due to many different forces, and all of those forces are codependent on our workforces or our talent. So let's talk about the very first one. There is no doubt in my mind that those of you operating in India have seen very fast morphing business models. Organizations that may have had a very traditional business model have been able to evolve that business model and adapt in ways that help them win in the market. Well, that's a fantastic thing for the organization to do competitively, but it also has a profound effect on what the talent needs to do in order to adopt that business model successfully. The competition that all of the organizations, no matter what industry sector you're operating in, it has new forms, it has new faces. Very often our customers, especially in the technology sector, speak about having to build out their competitive library and their competitive intelligence because they're constantly interfacing with new organizations that are attempting to disrupt their market. Technology disruptions, of course, none of us are immune from the disruptive effect that technology can bring, and also the pressures that puts on our workforces, not just those that operate within the IT sector, but literally every single knowledge worker is influenced in some way, shape, or form by a digital transformation agenda and a constantly moving technology landscape. And then the vast skill shortages. Certainly, those of you in India are experiencing this at even a more acute rate than we are here in the United States. But there's no doubt, no matter what media outlet, no matter what research report we turn to, there are skill shortages in just about every capability area that HR looks after. And then I'd like to talk to you about the influence of Vuca. What is Vuca? Some of you may be familiar with the term. Vuca is, there it is. I think it's building up. Vuca is representative. It looks like my slide didn't build. That's okay. Vuca is representative of the volatility, the ambiguity, the uncertainty, and the complete haze and confusion that all of us are operating in, no matter what industry, no matter what size company we happen to be representing. And those VUCA forces require human resource teams to adapt faster. Now, what do we need to do in order to adapt faster? We as an HR regime need to anticipate what our workforces are going to require. We need to be better prepared as well. We also need to get in there into the workflow and proactively intervene, and we need to evolve ourselves. And this shouldn't be frightening to any of us. I really feel like this is an exciting time, no better time to be in the human resources, and most especially within the talent and the learning field. Now, one of the things that we have observed is that the more learning and talent are cohesively aligned to the business strategy and they're integrated with one another, the more effective the human resources function is at fueling business performance. Now, we also feel that there is a philosophy around the convergence of talent and learning that Skillsoft is not alone in recognizing. Earlier this year, we had a fascinating conversation with Chief Learning Officer Magazine's editorial board. And one of the things that they shared with us is that they were coming to this exact same conclusion, that it was essential for human resources to bring together learning and talent to integrate the processes, the people flows, and the systems in order to achieve greater effect. And in fact, they invited Skillsoft to share in their message series that was occurring in July. And some of you may have seen an article entitled The Inevitable Fusion of Learning and Talent. That article was authored by myself as well as a colleague, Brent Colescott, and it really highlighted the model and the methodology I will share with you today. Now, what can this particular framework do to help you in your organizations? There are quite a few benefits. The first is that I will share with you as a student and as a practitioner of this field for more than 20 years, I have seen that other maturity models for learning and for talent do not reflect the interdependence of the two functions. In essence, they perpetuate the separatism between learning and talent, bringing about a siloed perspective which causes you and all of us as a field to be more inefficient and to miss valuable opportunities. The second benefit of adopting this model and using it in your planning and your strategic efforts is that we have truly come to understand that 5 stages in a maturity model are better than 4. Most industry models not only just look at learning separately and talent management separately, but most only have 4 stages. And as we have observed customers from all corners of the world, we know that there is a middle stage, a stage we call stage 3, that is characterized by immense transformation and change management. There has to be a stage where there is tension as an organization moves away from the traditional, stale, and old-style practices of the past, and when they turn to make a move toward adopting a more modern, progressive HR agenda. And we have firmly observed and recognized that unless you pause and call that transformation a specific stage, you really don't recognize the change effect and the profound number of resources, dollars, and people efforts that are required to make that transformation successful. The benchmarking framework that you will hear about this afternoon is also based on Skillsoft's observations of more than 6,700 different clients and 45 million employees. We also have validated this framework with 2 leading experts within the human capital management field, and I will share more about those details as we continue. This new model is not so new for Skillsoft. It is actually based on what we call the Skillsoft Learning Growth Model. And the Skillsoft Learning Growth Model served us very well for 12 different years. But what it didn't do is recognize the step change that is taking effect to expand the learning atmosphere into talent management much more successfully and much more cohesively. So that's why it's new, is because it blends the learning with the talent management side of the house. Now, before we unpack the 5 different stages, as was described in the beginning of this webinar, as we kicked off the session today, there's no doubt that organizations have an appetite and an aspiration to do more, faster, and better. There's immense pressure on all of you, and as a result, all of us as supplier partners. We want to be able to showcase better business performance, better people capability, and this model is an excellent instrument to help you chart a path toward that increased performance. So let's begin by talking about stage 1. In stage 1, the organization is characterized as siloed. What does that mean? The learning and the talent management functions are completely disparate processes. They have 2 different department names. Sometimes they report up to 2 different chief talent officers and chief learning officers. They certainly have different systems. One might be on a completely different platform than the other. The culture in these organizations is not very switched on. It's not very collaborative. It is incredibly hierarchical, and it is not, for the employees, considered to be very engaging. In a siloed organization, human resources tends to respond and react to the red phone, as it's so called, where business stakeholders and leaders ring up the learning function and explain what they need, demand what they need. In essence, they're placing a talent order. Instead of that human resources function proactively interfacing with the business, anticipating those needs. Often in a siloed organization, human resources is a very anemic staff, understaffed for the type of work that they need to fulfill. So as a result, this reactive disposition is around enforcing compliance. How many people need to take a specific compliance course by a specific date? Which teams have yet to fulfill their performance or their 360s by a certain date? So it's around conformity, and that's not a very engaging or a very enlightening place to be as an HR function. And most organizations operating in the stage 1 do desire very, very much to adopt a more progressive agenda. A stage 2 organization is what we refer to as the targeted organization. Here, the human resources function starts to understand that there are pathways that they can create between learning and talent. The very first pathway that is typically constructed is the one in the performance appraisal process. So some group within the learning and talent function starts to talk with one another about creating a dictionary or a library of capabilities or competencies such that when they're identified as a gap in the performance appraisal process, there is automatically rendered a series of different learning offerings designed to close that skill gap. That's most often the more popular pathway that is established as an organization starts to target more opportunity areas to work in a more integrated fashion between learning and talent. The second element about a targeted organization is that suddenly there's a more pronounced and a much more visible level of interest amongst the executives around designing better employee engagement experiences. There may be a formal employee engagement survey. There is typically no survey conducted, or it's conducted extremely infrequently and not repeated under a stage 1 organization. But here in a stage 2 organization, there is at least some routinized engagement pulse or measurement going on, because the executives come to understand that there is a direct correlation between the level of engagement that their employees are experiencing and their workforce productivity. The human resources team in this stage, the stage 2, is pursuing more understanding of the business stakeholders. They're out there in the field. They attempt to understand what a day in the life of the employee looks like so that they can be more prescriptive about the types of solutions that can be rendered from the talent management perspective as well as the learning perspective. That's a stage 2. But you heard me reference the very important stage 3. Stage 3 is the transformation period. It is the era of enlightenment. Here, the organization doesn't want to look like a siloed set of departments. They want to get rid of the different systems. So they start to converge better tools and platforms that bring talent and learning together. That is an enormous signifier of a transforming organization. The second piece of a stage 3 organization is around a philosophical shift. So we spoke about the fact that in stage 1, organizations are typically not as conscientious about measuring and heightening employee engagement. Stage 2, they become much more aware, and they become more, the measures become more popular and more frequent relative to employee engagement. But in a transforming organization, there is this entire philosophy that is embedded not only in the executive culture, but also within the management structure, no matter where that leader resides in the hierarchy. People in the organization start to intrinsically feel valued. They're valued and communicated that they're valued from day 1, all throughout the employee life cycle. The other aspect that's quite important about a transformation period is that employees begin to become much more accountable for steering their own career and their own development. What do I mean by that? Well, in a stage 1 or a stage 2 organization, what we've come to observe is that human resources has a command and control sort of approach. So they're communicating and bellowing things out and insisting on conformance and due process. But in stage 3, employees begin to be equipped with tools that help them be in the driver's seat of their career. And they have more visibility into the pathways that they might explore, whether it's a lateral move or a move vertically, upward, a promotion in the organization. It's easier for them to understand contextually what learning resources are available and offerings are on order. So that is an extremely important part of this entire model. It requires executive visibility and support in order to successfully navigate through that transformation. It also is often organized in some sort of center of excellence or a transformation group. So what we have observed is that some organizations actually put a label to this, and it can take them anywhere from 1 to 2, sometimes 3 years, depending on the complexity and the level of technologies that are inherent inside the organization in order to make that transformation. Now let's talk a little bit about life on the other side. What does stage 4 look like? Stage 4 is what we refer to as the continuous stage. Now, the big difference between stage 3 and stage 4 is that in a stage 4 organization, you have arrived on the other side of the transformation. You're not working to move and to change as much. in essence, what you've achieved is life on the other side. It looks like a very engaged employee culture. Employees are switched on. They're excited to come to work. They have very compelling projects to work on. This is also an organization that is typically characterized as highly responsive to forces of change in their industry. Here, human resources is a coveted place to be. It operates as an architect of the workforce, anticipating with people models what the advanced strategies and tool base should look like in order for the organization to stay at the fore. The other element about a Stage 4 continuous organization is that instead of trying to pull employees into the learning and the talent management experiences to drive uptake, here, the experience of the employee is so beautiful that the user experience is driving high levels of participation without human resources needing to do that on a more manual basis. Much more pull from the employees. Stage 5, you may be curious about this. This is the learning and talent nirvana. This is the optimized stage. This is the self-developing ecosystem that the employee experiences. These are the most sought-after cultures. These organizations have a long line of people trying to bang down their doors in order to get in. This is the coolest of cultures to be in. This is the envious place to be. Here in the Stage 5, the human resources team has extremely sophisticated short and long-term strategies. They have extensive established governance. They have the highest level of budgetary investment per capita in their employees, and they're adapting at an incredible rate. They also naturally exhibit a world-class employee experience. And this is not just isolated to the human resources or the learning and the talent experience. The entire employee experience is something that is thought through. So in these organizations, you might see a chief employee experience officer. In some clients that we work with, there's actually a director of happiness. So that's everything from how the employee commutes to work to the type of snacks that they may have in the refrigerator, in the offices. So it's not solely the experience around human resources, talent, and learning. It's everything that the employee touches throughout their workday. Those are the 5 different stages. And of course, in our session today, we can't do them complete justice. So we're going to be talking to you about the white paper that we also have created that goes into extensive detail across all 5. But let me also share with you how you come to understand which of the 5 you're operating in. What are the essential elements or indicators that we have used to allow you to evaluate your own stage? The first is culture, not just learning culture. Learning culture is a subset of the organizational culture as a whole. We spoke about the cultural characteristics not being very attractive at Stage 1 and being incredibly compelling at a Stage 5. The other is the way human resource operates, the role that they take on inside their organizations, and the characteristics of the strategies that they draft up. In a Stage 1, we spoke about the fact that HR is often very under-resourced, very understaffed, so they can only do just what they can to make it through the day, to do the most important work, but maybe not the most, or maybe the urgent work, but that might not be the most imperative to the strategic agenda. They often don't have extensive documented plans for how they're going to operate as a function, let alone a detailed learning strategy or talent management strategy. An organization at Stage 4 and Stage 5 obviously has extremely detailed plans when it comes to their strategies, and they also revisit those strategies on a very frequent basis in order to come to understand what they can do to make refinements to that in order to adapt to what they're experiencing within the culture and their industries. The third is around governance. We certainly couldn't talk about a maturity model without calling out governance. Many organizations in HR are often not very formally constructed. The decision process could be quite distributed. There could be many different decisions that are made in a vacuum, sometimes in one business unit, very differently than another. There are funding decisions that are often not made with complete visibility across all stakeholders. That's characteristic of a lower stage of maturity. Governance at the higher stages, there's a lot of meetings, there's precise agendas, there's accountability, and there's certainly shared decision-making across the group. The end-user experience. Now, I'm going to build out the next two indicators because I think it's important to distinguish between the two. There's a large difference between what we've observed in end-user experience versus the backbone or the technology infrastructure of an organization. They're often in some sort of cohesive level of sophistication. So typically what we found is a better user experience is often seen in tandem with a better technology infrastructure, but sometimes we'd be surprised organizations who, for whatever reason, don't have the ability to do the things they want to do in terms of making sure that technical systems, the HRIS systems, the learning and talent management systems are all speaking to each other from a back office perspective. Sometimes organizations have actually taken it upon themselves to create a better, more elegant end-user experience, even though they might not have a tremendously attractive technology backbone. And that's why we've called them out separately. It used to be that we looked at the two in tandem, but we see many organizations break away from the technology infrastructure, which may be an enormous undertaking to try to re-architect, to create their own slick mobile apps as well as interfaces into the world of learning and talent. Funding. There is absolutely no doubt that there is a correlation between funding per capita in the learning and the talent areas and the level of maturity of an organization. Organizations at the upper stages of the model simply put more funding, and they're better at utilizing those investments than organizations we see at the very rudimentary levels of the model, stage 1, stage 2. Learning and talent ownership. We talked about this making an enormous shift at stage 3. The learning and the talent responsibility moves from human resources and the learning and the talent stakeholders, more of that command control. It moves into the hearts and the minds and the fingertips of the employees as they're able to interface and use and extrapolate benefit from the systems that you put in a better user experience and a better ecosystem around them. The elective participation rate. So we used to have a model that called out the adoption rate of learning, penetration across the employee base, if you will. But in this new maturity framework, we've come to understand that organizations were counting regulatory and compliance participation in their overall adoption measures. And we believe that you really need to separate the level of absolute required training from what we call the elective training and the elective career and talent management offering utilization. So this really looks at what is the level of employee pull from your talent management offerings as well as your learning and development offerings that is not required, not part of your compliance and conformance activities. And And then last would be the level of measurement. So certainly many organizations are centered around utilization and participation measures, how many people have completed their succession plans on time, how many people have completed this development path, learning program. All of that is incredibly important. But organizations who are at the upper side of the model have more of a talent analytics and a predictive level of modeling capability and a very sophisticated level of measures that predict and obviously isolate the talent management and the learning input into a particular business outcome. That would be more characteristic of a stage 4 and a stage 5. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the 5 different stages, now 9 different indicators that characterize maturity. But what are we going to provide you in order to help you harness the power of this framework? There's 2 essential tools. The white paper. In 60 minutes, we couldn't possibly go into every single level of specifics in terms of the framework. There is a tremendous amount of detail, 4 or 5 pages, that characterize the 9 different indicators across the 5 levels of maturity within the white paper. The other element is our diagnostic, which we are extremely excited about. We've created an online living, breathing diagnostic that not only helps you ascertain where you are today, but it shows you what is the next logical step across the 9 different indicators for your organization to take. We have also incorporated key questions, strategies, tips, tools, and resources into the diagnostic, so you would receive a report directly in your browser. The diagnostic takes about 15 minutes to complete, and at the end of the diagnostic, you get this beautiful report that enables you to understand across all 9 indicators what are the things that we could consider as we chart a path forward to a higher stage. Now, I mentioned the 4 different steps to charting that path. The first is that we invite you to diagnose your organization's current stage across the 9 different indicators using the diagnostic I mentioned a moment ago. There are 2 hotspots in the white paper that lead to the diagnostic. The diagnostic is completely complementary. The second step is to use the diagnostic to understand what's that next stage across all 9 indicators for you. The diagnostic has the prescriptions. It has the tips and the borrowed brilliance from thousands of different organizations that are operating in that stage and what the best practices that they applied toward getting to a higher stage. And then, of course, you want to chart your progress. You want to be able to document in an operating plan how to move from where you are into where you want to be. The other thing that is very unique about the Skillsoft way in this diagnostic and all of the prescriptions is that this is not only our viewpoint. This is really the collation and the accumulation of other organizations, the best practices they have shared, and they continue to share. So as organizations have been taking our diagnostic since it was launched in May of this year, we have been accumulating industry, company size, and geographic, demographic elements so that we can publish benchmarks as soon as those sample sizes continue to grow. We have about 400 to 500 different diagnostics within the database today. We're going to continue to build them out so that we have sample sizes to be able to report out, here is the maturity and here are the 9 different indicators, the state by industry sector, by large and small company size, and certainly by geography. We also are going to continue to feed the back end of the diagnostic with the brilliance from our customer base. And we do that by harvesting them from the communities. We have a Skillsoft client community with thousands of different practitioners working just like you, in the same trenches, just like you. And then, of course, in our Sum Total Connect community, again, people who look just like you, have the same struggles. What are they doing to take their organizations a level higher? I mentioned to you that this wasn't solely something that we looked at constructing in harmony with the customer base. We went out and triangulated the research with 2 industry thought leaders, and now even more since the white paper's publication. But Laura Overton has a wonderful editorial piece inside the white paper. She is the #1 e-learning industry influencer in the United Kingdom, ranked #3 in the globe. She's also a fellow of CIPD. She's the managing director of a research entity called Towards Maturity. Perhaps some of you have seen her work. And she says that organizations who adopt this type of more progressive agenda see better business improvement, efficiencies, increased productivity, business agility, and they're also embodying more of that learning-centric culture. Shreya Sakkar-Barney is also another expert that we invited. She is the president and founder of an organization called Human Capital Growth and the former SHRM chairperson. She's a lecturer at UC Berkeley, and she was an incredible asset and advisor to the development of this model, and she also expresses her testimony and her confidence in the maturity framework at helping the learning and talent function become a better partner to the business. So as we begin to wrap up, I wanted to leave you with a couple of questions to consider. First, what is the stage that you think your organization is operating in today? In just a few moments, I'm going to queue up a poll. But I'm sure that as we've unpacked this framework, you've been starting to self-diagnose. The second question is, what do you believe to be the top 2 or 3 priority indicators? There are 9 in the framework. We do not advise that you attempt to tackle and address all 9 at the same time. So we advise that you take 2 to 3 and assign them as the key top priorities and focus on actioning them and moving change forward there. Then take the next 3 priority indicators and then your tertiary or the last 3 priority indicators. So look at this as a series of groups of 2 to 3 priority indicators at a time and calibrate your action plan to reflect that level of prioritization. Otherwise, it may be too overwhelming to try to move the needle in all 9 areas simultaneously. The other is, what will you need? Resources, funding, executive sponsorship in order to ascend up the framework. And who are the influencers that are going to need to be enlisted in order for you to be successful in moving the change process in your transformation forward? These are the 4 key questions to consider as you step away from the session today. So now what we'd like to do is open for you the poll. We're going to ask you if you would characterize yourself as a siloed, targeted, transforming, continuous, or optimized organization. So let's go ahead and open up the poll. We see most organizations operating in stage 2. As we've conducted this webinar with other entities, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. Great. Some stage 3. Excellent. Excellent. We'll give it another minute. Love to hear from you. Ooh, we have a stage 4. Fantastic. Love the stage 4. That's terrific news. I'm so excited about that. That is rare air, as we call it. Typically, when we've conducted a poll, and certainly in the diagnostic, we only see single digits represented in stage 4 and stage 5. so maybe 3, 4, perhaps 6% in any sort of a research pool that we're conducting operating in stage 4 and stage 5. Excellent. And the stage 1, yes. Stage 1 organizations, you're in great company. There's lots of organizations operating in a stage 1. So thank you so much for sharing those remarks. As we wrap today, we'd like to leave you with some suggestions for you to take action. Number 1, read the white paper that will be provided to you as a follow-up to today's webinar. It has so much rich detail and the 2 perspectives from the thought leaders. It also includes a matrix of the 5 different stages and 9 indicators. We encourage you to dive into the diagnostic. You could do it collectively as a team or as individuals. I will tell you, if you address it as a team, allow much more than 15 minutes. If you're completing it as an individual and it's your sole perspective that you're using in the response, it takes about 15 minutes. But if you were to collect your team together and conduct it as an exercise, I would allocate the better part of an hour for discussion, because you'll understand that individuals you're working with could have completely different viewpoints on the various indicators. But it's a fantastic opportunity for you to get to know more about the thought process and perspective of your colleagues. The third is that if you're an existing customer of Skillsoft or SumTotal, or both, we invite you to review the diagnostic results and identify the priority indicators with your account team so that we can help you operationalize that plan. If you're not a customer but you're interested in taking part in the diagnostic and what we can do to support your success, you can contact us at apac@skillsoft.com or that phone number that's listed on the screen. So at this point, I'd like to thank you tremendously for the generous amount of time that you've allocated. I think what we'll do at this point is open up the question and the answer period. So let's go ahead and see what kinds of questions have come into the queue.
Thank you so much, Kieran, for the great insights. We will now move to the questions from our listeners. So the first question we have received is from Shekhar, and he's asking how to attract, select, manage, engage, reward, and retain the right talent in small organizations.
Can you repeat that again? Was it about engagement in small organizations? Was that the crux of the question?
So I'll just repeat it once again. So he's asking how to attract, select, manage, engage, reward, and retain the right talent in small organizations.
Yeah. So small organizations are often constrained by limited human resources. Many times the organizations that are in that small sector, the human resources person may wear many hats. So they may be responsible for talent management, plus learning, plus talent attraction, plus conformance and regulatory types of responsibilities within human resources. From our observations, what we find is that most often the best thing that you can do to prioritize your time in a small organization is to first understand and take inventory of the skills that you have within the current workforce. That gives you a baseline of what capability you have so that as the organization unfolds their strategic priorities and the agenda of the executives, you know firsthand what skills and capabilities are there that can help in executing that agenda. By taking that baseline assessment of the skills inventory inside your workforce, it also allows you to understand and measure the delta that you need to develop if you do not have the current capabilities. It also, in my opinion, helps inform you in order to advise on the recruitment strategy. It could be that you take existing employees, some faction of existing employees, and you can upskill or reskill them as the organization needs to shift and change. But it could also be the case that you need to attract talent from the outside. those are extremely important and expensive decisions. So before making that decision, you really, really fundamentally need to understand, what's that talent inventory of capabilities that I have today? That's really, I think, the most important thing for you to focus on. And then once you do understand the talent capabilities that you have inside the workforce, I would focus and really double down and pay attention to the teams that are most critical to your strategic performance, and understand what the engagement level is inside those teams, what the retention risk is inside that team. Because you can't do that typically in a small organization across all of the employees, I would focus on the ones that are most vital to your organization's success. So it's really a matter of baselining skills and focusing on the engagement and the retention risk of the most essential employees. Hopefully that helps. Are there other questions in the queue?
Thank you, Kieran, for answering the same. So the next question is from Naina, and she's asking, how does the model fit into outsourced situations, like when a large part of company's operations are outsourced, but the company is responsible for development of those outsourced skills?
Ooh, good question. So this question about outsourcing skills. So sometimes an organization, and we've also seen this happen, there's a lot of transformation and disruption when organizations merge or acquire another entity. It's extremely complex for human resources to try to get their arms around it. But when an organization elects to outsource skills, I believe wholeheartedly that can be an extremely smart strategy. When you're outsourcing skills, you are not responsible for taking that inventory that we just talked about before, for building the bench, for making sure that there is sufficient capability in a certain area. If your organization's needs go up dramatically in a short period of time for a specific skill set, now you have one organization to go to that is responsible for sourcing that talent. I believe if you're working in an extremely fast-paced environment, outsourcing those skills is extremely smart. Outsourcing the talent attraction, outsourcing the talent development and talent management function could be incredibly beneficial to you. And the reason is because there's just more to do than typically the human resource team can ever tackle. Many human resources functions are understaffed. We talked about that today. So if you're a stage 1 or a stage 2 organization and you feel that you don't have enough human resources personnel in order to address the to-do list that you have been tasked with, absolutely creating a business case to outsource some of those functions, the one that is probably the area of most concern, that would be a very intelligent strategy to pursue. Now, the business case isn't easy, but what I would do is look back on the last 3 to 5 years of the human resources functions capability and performance in that area and talk about the throughput or the number of different initiatives you were able to address. That will give you a relative ratio of the pace that you can operate in with the current staff. If you suddenly have to accelerate in a certain area, they're either going to have to hire more human resources staff internally or outsource. So it depends on how many results need to be achieved in what period of time. If it's an enormous amount of results in a very compressed period of time, I think outsourcing is the best strategy. So hopefully that's helpful. Great questions.
Thank you so much, Kieran. So the next question is from Soma, and she's asking how HR can measure the accountability in steering one's or employees' development and career.
How HR can ensure accountability about how employees take responsibility for their career. Is that the question? I think so.
How HR can measure the accountability?
Yes. So first of all, human resources very often is operating without a set of performance criteria, or they have a very traditional way of reporting out their own performance by the number of hires that were onboarded, the number of people who took training, the number of succession plans or 360s that were captured within the performance or the talent management processes. Those are table stakes. Those are things that we naturally should be reporting on. But the more progressive organizations actually work, we talked about the level of architect at stage 4. A stage 4 organization includes the business stakeholders and executives in the fashioning or the construction of the KPIs within the human resources function, and they extend outside the traditional things you might consider as an HR measure. So, for example, in a stage 4 organization or a stage 5 organization, there might be accountability of HR to help in creating and penetrating more market share in a particular market segment. Or they may assume accountability and responsibility, maybe in part allocated to HR for a new product rollout or sales. So here in a higher stage, it is a shared responsibility of not just what HR can report out on, but there's a conversation that takes effect with the business stakeholder so that HR assumes a level of responsibility and accountability arm in arm, lockstep with the business. That is it's something that we also see. There's great guidance in what we call the Center for Talent Reporting, or CTR. If you Google Center for Talent Reporting, there's fantastic guidance on how human resources can take on greater levels of accountability and responsibility for business outcomes, how to navigate the conversation with the business stakeholder, and how to come up with reasonable goals and areas of responsibility for learning and for talent as part of a business outcome. So again, that's the Center for Talent Reporting. It's a great organization. It's non-for-profit, and it's a gift to the industry. They have terrific guidance on their website. Great questions. Anything else in the queue?
Yes, Kieran, we have received many questions, but as time is a constraint, we would request you to take them offline.
I would be happy to.
So with this question and answer session, we are going to wrap up today's webinar. Once again, we would like to thank today's webinar partner, Skillsoft. Our special thanks to both our speakers, Kieran, for this webinar and invaluable information that she has shared with us today. I would also like to thank everybody in the webinar audience for participating in today's presentation. Stay tuned for many more such exciting sessions. That concludes today's webcast. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and the rest of the week. Bye-bye.